So I'm going to jump right in. I have been doing one hell of a deep dive, not just into my personal history, but I've been doing a deep dive into my YouTube history and just really trying to get to the bottom of things. And the thing about being in trauma therapy, which a lot of people know, being in trauma therapy, we are kind of responsible for going into our past. And a lot of it is taking your past, taking a lot of these problematic beliefs that could potentially really affect you and has caused a lot of it. We're forced to put those things on trial. And it's a really interesting method, and it's something that I've been doing quite a lot. So visiting and revisiting my history has been something that has been very much part of my reality for the last 2 years. So if you've been with me since the beginning, I'm pretty sure you probably noticed one hell of a demeanor shift, and that has a lot to do with it, because it really has to do with you pick your battles. You look into the reasons why you feel the things you do or the way you do about certain things and what brought you there in the first place. Then you put it on trial, and then you disprove that very thing. And that, in theory, is meant to bring you peace. It's meant to kind of fix. Here we are. So I wanted to revisit some things, some problematic things and views and whatnot that I don't really believe anymore, or I feel differently about, or I'm kind of scratching my head and looking at it and saying, wow, why did I think that way? Or why did I care so much? Why did I get so aggro over these things? And I wanted to touch on those things. And I'm going to be admitting some things here, which I don't know. I'm going to be honest, I don't know if it's going to make it into the video, but it's important I get them out there. It's important we talk about them as well, because there are things that I have made videos about, I've made content about, and I've expressed those things to you. And if you're watching, you're internalizing, you're taking this in, I think it's important that if those views change in any way, or if I think better of it, or I've learned better, that I express that to you or share that with you, because I certainly don't want anyone kind of going around with information or ideas that can be potentially harmful. So with that being said, I'm going to get into it. So fashion. Fashion is a big part of my life. Fashion has always been, like, before I got into my career of aesthetics and skincare, my first history revolved around fashion, because that was my future. That's what I wanted. And I absolutely adore fashion. Fashion's a big part of my life. I love designing, creating. Fashion has always been a big thing. I love watching different runway shows, following certain designers, Yohji Yamamoto, Comme des Garçons. I know I'm gonna butcher some of these names because French is not my forte. But all of these interesting and unique, creative, avant-garde designers, I love, oh my God, Alexander McQueen. Have you ever seen Betsy Johnson in the 90s? Anna Sui, Marchesa. So all of these designers, all of these people are artists to me, and these are people that I looked up to. But that being said, fashion being such a big part of my life, getting involved in the online subculture, really trying to build a channel and impart the wisdom that I do, it was important that I downplayed the fashion aspect of it. As much as I love it, as much as it's part of me and who I am, and I think is a part of the subculture. It's not the meat and potatoes of it, not by any stretch, but it's a big part of it. And the reason that I've had to downplay that is because there is a lot of misinformation out there floating around about goth being a fashion movement. It's all about the look and the aesthetic, and who cares about the music, when in actuality it's the core. Music is the core, and it's important that we instill that and keep that going. That's really what it's all about, because if you turn it into just a fashion movement, it becomes something very soulless and very vapid, and it changes things. It changes that aspect of it, and it really not only cheapens it, but it's one of the things that can really destroy a subculture. Can people new getting into it, maybe they do like the music, and maybe they'll get led astray and led to believe that this is what it is. And so it was important to me to really impress upon you the importance of the fact that yes, it is a music-based subculture, but in doing that, I really had to downplay, as much as I love fashion, I had to downplay my love of the fashion so as not to give you the wrong idea and think, oh, okay, well, she looks like this, or she loves these things, I gotta love them too. Fashion is so very important. And I felt like that would be taking away from it. But I think, now that time has gone on, the community has grown. It's still an issue. There's still so many people. I mean, go to TikTok if you dare. But there are still many people who do firmly hold true to the idea that it is a fashion and nothing more than that. And in actuality, I've said it a bazillion times, goths don't own the patent on dark themes. You want to dress dark, you want to dress goth, that's on you. But we take sort of issue when you start calling yourself a goth, and then you're not. So, say for example, you're not listening to the music. But on the whole, goths really don't care if you're dressing the part, you're wearing the clothes, and you like the aesthetic. Fashion is something that is very subjective, and it's a form of expression. And if that is your aesthetic, like something that speaks to you is goth fashion, but you don't like the music, wear it. That there's nothing wrong with that. It's just when people start to identify themselves as goth and then they start espousing things that aren't true. And for some reason, I have no idea why this is the case, but the people who will glom onto the whole concept of being a goth when they don't listen to the music, they for some reason are very vocal and they have these really ridiculous views, and they just can't help but putting themselves on a soapbox and projecting it out into the world and saying, no, I've decided that this is what it is, and just start putting these false ideas out there. But unfortunately they stick onto us, actual goths. And then you have new people who come along and they're like, oh, this loud person over here that dresses really cool says these things, and they believe it. So that's why it was always so damn important for me to be like, no, it's like music, music, music. But fashion is very much part of it as well. And I guess one of the problematic things or views that I've changed, or I guess calmed down on, is the fact that, yeah, fashion is a big deal. It is important. It's not everything, certainly not everything, but I think that if you love the fashion, but you also are passionate about the subculture, that doesn't mean that you need to play down the fashion part or minimize that part of yourself. I don't necessarily regret hiding that part of myself, because I think I would let that part of myself out every now and again, but I think it's more along the lines of a time and place kind of thing. It's along the lines of, okay, we're okay now. I've said all I need to say, and we can start talking about the fashion now. You get it. You get that if you've been with me long enough, you know it is a music-based subculture. Let's freaking talk fashion now. It's okay. Alternatively, there are people who don't express goth on the outside. As in, they don't dress the part. They love the music, they listen to the music, but they don't dress the part. And that doesn't necessarily make them any less of a goth either. So I also didn't want to discount those people or make them feel in any way left out or not part of the thing. I know how hard it is to find goth nowadays in an age of excess. So I really want to help as much as possible. And I think, for me, I do hide certain aspects so as not to confuse, so as not to make anyone feel intimidated in any way, and like they have to do those things because you're young, you're new, you're very impressionable, and you feel like, okay, I need to do this stuff. This stuff is so important, and you naturally want to basically emulate the person that is conveying that information. And that's not necessarily the case because it takes away from you. It takes away from who you are. It takes away from your experience and your growth because you still have to become the person that you are. And if you're stifled by, I guess, the messenger of the person who is kind of giving you little bits and pieces and insight into the subculture, you naturally want to emulate that, which is burying yourself. And I don't want that to happen because it would be a shame for you to make it like 10, 20 years and realize, all that time I had all of these views or ideas and I didn't get to express that. I didn't get to express myself because I inadvertently started expressing someone else. But that is one of the things. Fashion, big frickin' deal, but it is not the end all be all. If you've been with me for a while, I don't know if you remember, I used to kind of call out and take issue with other goth YouTubers, and the reason I'm using finger quotes is a lot of them weren't necessarily goths themselves. It was a label or a kind of a persona that they'd given themselves in order to kind of sell content. And it irritated me to no end because it reflected upon other goths, and they were behaving so obnoxiously, and those that followed them and truly believed that this is what goth was, they were churning out other people who were just as obnoxious as they were. And I guess as some kind of an insurance policy, or make sure that their identity or their cover wasn't blown, they would really impress upon people that the actual goths that were part of the subculture, like real goths that listened to the music, were gatekeepers, we were elitist. And here's the thing, and I would get called gatekeeper all the time, and I got to see other people who were just trying to do videos or content about music or things involving the subculture, things that these other goth YouTubers were claiming not part of it, because goth is a mindset, and goth is a fashion, and goth is cool. He literally said that. I'm talking about Jake Monroe. But it irritated me because it created a sort of mentality that was aggressive, it was antagonistic, it was obnoxious, and they would in turn sort of come to us and be like, you're elitist, you're gatekeepers, you're not real goths, etc., etc. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, do you know what an actual gatekeeper is? Because surely a gatekeeper is keeping you from information, not giving it to you. The guy that's e-begging and asking you for all of this money is the real goth, but the people that are trying to help you find music, find the fashion, tell you stories, help keep the scene going, and those are the gatekeepers. Those are the elitists. Those are the ones that are the problematic ones, and that pissed me off. So naturally, I got very aggro about it, and I would make content about it, and I would really want it out there. I wanted people to know the difference and to really know what real goth is versus, these people. And it is important to know, if you really want to get involved in the subculture, it is important to know what the genuine stuff is, like what the real music is and how to find it, because it is hard to find nowadays. There's so much oversaturation and so many different people kind of using that hashtag and using that label because it's cool. So it is harder, but nowadays, now that a lot of that time has passed, what I do realize is that anyone worth their salt is gonna know the difference. Eventually they're gonna know. Anybody with any staying power, they're gonna look for the legitimate stuff. And it's really up to us to kind of help point you in the right direction should you need it. But everyone else that falls for this, eventually they snap out of it. The other people, they're the people that goth is just a phase to them anyway, so they won't necessarily be an issue. But that being said, we will always try to dispel rumors. I always will. I try to dispel misconceptions because I do naturally just want to help and put that information out there, but at the same time, I'm not so aggro about it anymore. It's important, definitely important, but it is certainly not worth raising my blood pressure over. So that's probably a view that I've certainly calmed down about. I no longer want to, wring these people's necks. Like, I'm sure anybody with half a brain knows that social repose is not an actual goth. And that's okay. People like It's Black Friday, people that I would get irritated for hauls and unboxings and commercialism and all that. Honestly, Black Friday puts actual goth music in her videos. So it's not like she's trying to say goth is a mindset. She just does other kinds of content. She caters to more of the masses. She doesn't necessarily cater to goth specifically, and that's okay. So it's really not for me to kind of police anyone's content. It's not for me to kind of see it and dispel it. I want to with certain things, but again, it's all about picking your battles. In the end, it's all about picking your battles. What is important, what is not important. Now, if somebody goes out there and says something really problematic, like for example, things that I do go after, like the whole, big titty goth girlfriend thing, I will forever be fighting against that whole concept, that whole label, because of how it reflects upon us. Because we've all have been approached in some way by a normie that has seen this kind of thing perpetuated by goth YouTubers or goth rappers and believe it to be so. And they approach us in problematic ways because of the stereotypes that are created about us. We are self-harmers. We have drug issues. We have daddy issues. We have mental instability. We want pain. We want to be hurt. For some reason, they always have us down as submissives that want to be choked. And it's problematic because the type of guy that attracts, they want to dominate you. So naturally, they think that the way I've noticed, I have a really good analogy here. I do a lot of online gaming. And in my online gaming, my name or my handle has the word goth in it. And automatically, there are a lot of sort of misconceptions that come along with that. And I do get people saying some pretty outlandish stuff. Like, for example, and I've had to say a few times, because some really perverted things were said to me. Listen, I'm not a fetish. Just because I listen to this music, I am not a fetish. Well, why do you have that word in your name then? As if the term goth is something perverted. It's in my name so I can find other goths. Well, if you're not a fetish, then why are you a category on Pornhub? You know, so is stepmom, so is potato. Doesn't necessarily, because somebody decides to implement Rule 34, it doesn't make it so, but the fact that it has been done, that's a problem. And there are other things that they've said to me as well. The normies, like, once they see the name, they're like, oh, you're a goth, go cut your wrist. Horrible, horrible misconception that goths are these mentally unstable cutters, when in actuality, we're probably more well-rounded than your average normie because we're not holding anything in. If anything, we're very open about ourselves. We're open about our views. We're open about what we're feeling. We're going to tell you exactly how we feel, because a goth is a lot more likely to express themselves in an emotional sense, to talk about their mental health, to talk about their mental state. Not everyone wakes up okay. Everybody has their issues. Every single person has something. But when it comes to goths are far more likely to talk about it, while the normie folk, they keep it inside. They internalize it because they don't want to break with protocol. They don't want to be seen as whatever it is they may be seen as, because they have anxiety, because they have depression, because they have intrusive thoughts, or any of these things, which everybody has. But we're more inclined to talk about it. So naturally, that gets kind of put on goths. Like, oh, goths are mentally unstable. No, we're not mentally unstable. In fact, we're probably a lot more stable than you because we're going to talk about it. But because we're the ones that are far more inclined to talk about it versus the others that don't, we're the ones that get branded with the ones with mental issues, and they're the ones that don't. Because here we are. I feel this way, I feel that way, and they're just more... Don't hold it in. Never hold it in, because what happens when we hold things in, it's like a soda bottle. It just becomes more and more pressurized. The more you fill it up, the more you shake it up. Eventually that lid is just going to blow off, and then what? However, that being said, I'm not saying that there aren't some goths out there that don't have some really hardcore mental struggles. But what I am saying is, just because we are goths doesn't mean we do. Everyone does. Everybody has a brain, everybody has emotions, everybody has issues in life. Just because I'm a goth and the other person happens to be a normie doesn't mean that we don't have taxes or rent or student loans. Same crap, same issues. It's just a matter of how we deal with it. So I recommend, eyeliner or not, talk about it. So continuing on the whole deep dive and going into my past, going into my history, and things that I don't believe, things that I do believe. And I know I've talked about my ex before, and it was in a video of problematic things I don't believe, because I felt it was really important post-trauma therapy. Well, I say post, I'm still like really in the depths of it. I'm about almost 3 years in, that I really impressed upon you that my initial assessment of the situation prior to therapy was incorrect. The way that I impressed it upon you was that we were both at fault, meaning that I placed a lot of that blame on myself. And that is something with people that have trauma and suffer from trauma do. We place a lot of the blame on ourselves in situations in which we were victims. And that was something that I felt was really dangerous, that I kept out there. Because after therapy and after really going through this whole thing and getting and really touching on these things, I realized that I was the victim of narcissistic abuse. I was the victim of reactive abuse. And reactive abuse is a big one. And reactive abuse is a lot of the reason that a lot of us hold on to that sort of guilt and hold on to the concept that we're in any way responsible. And I'm going to explain to you why, because I'm sure some of you might have been in these situations before. So I'm going to explain what reactive abuse is. Reactive abuse is when a reaction is provoked out of you to the abuse, and then it's then in turn turned around and used against you to really disorient you and make the victim of the abuse seem as if they're the abuser, which is incredibly disorienting. So the way that it works is there's really only so much a person can take when you are on the receiving end, and eventually what that person does, what the abuser does, is they wait for that fight or flight response to kick in. And when that response kicks in, it's never going to be small. You're going to react in a big way. You're going to yell, you're going to scream, you're going to throw things, you're going to start crying and really act in a way that might make you seem as if you're unstable because you feel like you're losing your mind. But in that situation, what happens is the abuser got exactly what they want. They got that reaction out of you and they say, oh my God, how are you so abusive toward me? And they turn the situation around immediately. And in that moment, they're able to manipulate the situation and abuse you that much further by making you truly believe, despite the fact that you are the victim, they make you believe that you're actually the abuser. And it's in those moments where you're at your most vulnerable and you are basically experiencing an adrenaline rush. You are in fight or flight. So it's disorienting and it's traumatic. And it's in those moments where you could really use any kind of humanity, where it's turned around on you. And what's disorienting about it, you're feeling the effects of truly being abused. But in your mind, you're the abuser, because reactive abuse programs you to believe that you're the one that's the abuser. So they'll take those reactive moments, they'll take those moments of vulnerability, and they'll use them against you in any way that they possibly can, like in a lot of ways to discredit you as a person, try to challenge your stability, because in a lot of senses, you'll break down, you'll cry, you'll collapse into a heap onto the floor, just in tears, hysterical, and they'll bring that up because you're completely inconsolable, you're sobbing, you can't speak, and they'll say, remember the time you collapsed on the kitchen floor and you were sobbing uncontrollably like a psychopath? No wonder I don't love you anymore. And it's used against you like that. And it is so confusing because you don't realize that you're being provoked into these actions, and you also feel this incredible sense of guilt because you have been made to believe that you are the perpetrator. And that's a hard thing to get over. So that was also something that I spoke about in the past, and something really important I really wanted to impart is that it's not always a 50-50 thing, because oftentimes when we get in these relationships and we get into these situations, if we were told from the very beginning that this was their plan all along, that this is what the relationship was going to turn out to be, or this is how they were going to treat us, we wouldn't get into it in the first place. Blaming yourself for getting into the relationship in the first place when you were lied to and manipulated and given a false idea of what to expect, how the hell is that your fault? So that was one of the things that I really wanted to impress upon you and impress upon people. And I know I didn't touch on it in the last video, but I really wanted to touch on the whole concept of reactive abuse, because that was a big part of it for me. And I spent a lot of time just so confused because I was feeling all of the effects of abuse, but feeling all of the guilt of somebody who felt like or was made to believe that they hurt someone else or that they were all of these things. when in fact it was all just orchestrated. So some people recover from those kinds of things. Other people, it takes a lot of work. But what also really helps is hearing your experience out of somebody else's mouth to maybe help you realize that this is a situation that you're in and it isn't your fault. Not your fault. So that initial video that I made on the subject a few years ago, and I know I've made a follow-up video and I've expressed as much, but I really think it's really important that I reiterate that I was wrong in what I had said. I acknowledge that I was wrong, and I think that it was dangerous and problematic of me to put it out there that you are in any way at fault for any kind of abuse that you suffered. And I'm glad that I'm able to rethink that now. I'm glad that I was able to be put in a position where I was able to receive the much needed trauma therapy to kind of come to terms with that and understand that, because that in itself has helped me immeasurably, has helped me and has helped me kind of get through a lot of bad situations. So I think that it's really important. Stuck to the chair. When we're in situations that we are seeking answers for, or we're in situations that are problematic or troublesome or traumatic for us, we're always looking for other people that have been through the same, because we want answers. Sometimes it's not as easy as finding them for yourself, because sometimes it could feel like you're the only person in the world that's going through those very things. And sometimes hearing your story or hearing your feelings coming out of the mouth of someone else that's been through it could make or break a situation. And I don't want to be the person that says the things that holds you in that situation, or not only keeps you in that relationship, or say you get out of that relationship and you go on believing that you had anything to do with that, because in actuality, how the hell are you to blame for any abuse that you have received? Because the reality of the thing is that if we were given a disclaimer at the very beginning of the relationship that this is how it's going to go down, this is how you're going to get treated, there's no way in hell that we would ever get involved in a relationship like that. We would be out of our minds. Oh really? You're going to do all of these things? You're going to treat me this way? No, bye-bye. Not going to happen. And then we'd be on our merry way and not having this conversation. But that's never the way it goes down, because when you meet the person, you're not meeting them, you're meeting their representative. You're meeting the false front that they project in order to snag you and get you involved into the situation. And then once they do, they take you down the never-ending water slide to hell. So again, as I said, yes, I said those things in the past. Yes, I said that I was partially to blame and that we are partially to blame. But if you were lied to and manipulated to get into a situation and you had a bait and switch pulled on you, that is not your fault. Because the first step to healing is to get that blame right the hell off of yourself, because one of the main things they teach you in trauma therapy is when we have trauma, self-blame is a big one. So just shed it. Get rid of it. So one of the things that happen quite often is it revolves around the same thing, but I have recurring nightmares of the situation and of something that happened to me in the relationship that particularly caused me trauma. It was a particular event that was very dysregulating, very destabilizing, and it was enough. And I dream about that very thing. That's a nightmare that has me waking up with a panic attack. It's hard. And I know that a lot of you have been there before, where you dream of the event and it's like it's happening all over again. And I have come to find that it's not an uncommon thing for people to dream about these traumatic events that took place, but have it be perpetrated by somebody they love most in the world. So it's like the face of the perpetrator changes to the one that you love, and that's so jarring. And just know that getting through it and getting through the therapy is, you can move past it. And I want to help you by giving you an app that was given to me. So it is called CPT Coach, and CPT stands for Cognitive Processing Therapy. And in cognitive processing therapy, what you're basically doing is you're taking all of these things. You're taking your stuck points, which are things that keep you stuck in a particular place and unable to move forward and progress. You're taking challenging beliefs, you're doing problematic thinking, and then there are worksheets in this. And you're taking those very things and you're summarizing it into one sentence, and you're putting it on trial from start to finish, and you're asked all of these questions. And what you're doing is you are the judge and jury in your own trauma and your own mind. And you're taking that one problematic thought and that one problematic belief, and you are putting it on trial. And at the very end, because you're going to be doing this over and over again until you believe it, and at the very end, you are challenged to challenge that problematic thought or belief and see how you feel about it now. So the app is called CPT Coach. You can get it in Google Play, and the instructions are pretty easy on how to follow, how to do the worksheets, and how to work through them. But I think I've rambled enough. I think I've talked your ear off enough, and I had like my whole plan on how I was going to go about this. I had like my list of all the things that I don't believe anymore, or I'm not so aggressive about anymore, etc. And I closed that book and said, let's just wing it and see how it goes. So that's what we did. But that leaves more for next time. So we can kind of touch on other things. But if you have any questions about things that I've talked about in the past and you're curious, by all means, let me know. I'm still revisiting. I'm going back 6-7 years into my YouTube history and even deeper with other stuff. So I expect more of these videos, and I hope that you find them helpful. So until next time, thank you for watching, and see ya.